The last entry in Sienna's journal, the one she kept for Ava, said this: "Baby girl, I used to hide when I cried. I thought tears were shameful, proof that I was failing. But tears are just truth trying to escape. They're stories demanding to be heard. Don't hide yours. Let them water something better. Find people who ask if you're okay and mean it. Be the person who asks others. Build a world where no one has to choose between compassion and survival. Where medicine never needs to be diluted. Where 90 seconds of kindness is celebrated, not punished. Where every break room is a place of breakthrough, not breakdown. That's the world we're building. One tear, one truth, one transformation at a time. For you, for everyone, for all the Siennas still waiting to be seen." But the story didn't end there. It couldn't. Because transformation isn't a destination. It's a journey that requires constant vigilance, constant remembering of why the work matters. 10 years after that first encounter in the break room, Eli found himself back where it all started. Store number 473 had been completely renovated, but he'd insisted on one thing. Keep the original break room. Update it, yes. Add comfortable chairs and better lighting, absolutely. But preserve the space where everything changed. He stood there now, no longer the young CEO who thought efficiency was everything, but a leader who understood that numbers without humanity were just digital cruelty. The refrigerator was new, but he knew exactly where Sienna had hidden that day. A small plaque on the wall marked the spot. Change begins with caring. October 15th, 2025. Employees touched it for luck, a talisman against forgetting that their struggles mattered. Sienna joined him, no longer the frightened girl, but a force of nature in her own right. Vice President of Human Development, a title she'd created because human resources suggested people were just another commodity to be managed. Her daughter Ava, now 13 and determined to become both a paleontologist and a CEO, someone has to dig up the past and fix the future, Mom, had grown up in a world where her mother's job meant helping people, not just scanning barcodes. "Remember when you couldn't even take charity coffee?" Eli asked, gesturing at the gourmet machine that now offered 20 varieties, all free to employees. Sienna smiled, but her eyes remained serious. "I remember everything. The fear, the shame, the weight of pretending to be okay when you're drowning. That's why I make every new executive work a month on the floor. Not undercover, not pretending, really work it. Feel what it's like to have a customer scream at you for something beyond your control. Experience the panic of choosing between a doctor's appointment and a paycheck. Live the reality we're asking thousands of people to endure." The program had been controversial. Several VPs had quit rather than submit to demeaning labor. "Good," Sienna had said. "If you can't handle a month of what your employees do for years, you have no business making decisions about their lives." The ones who stayed came back changed. They understood viscerally why bathroom breaks mattered, why flexible scheduling could mean the difference between keeping and losing a job, why dignity wasn't a luxury but a necessity. "I got a letter yesterday," Sienna continued, pulling out her phone. "From Marcus Chen." Eli's eyebrows shot up. The former supervisor had vanished after his termination, becoming a cautionary tale whispered in management training. "He's working at a small hardware store in Montana. Says he's been in therapy, working through why he became what he became. He apologized. Really apologized, not the corporate kind where you're sorry for any misunderstanding. He said watching you stand up for me that day broke something in him. Made him realize he'd become the kind of boss he'd once hated." She scrolled through the message. He wrote, "I turned pain downward instead of upward. I took my frustrations out on people who couldn't fight back, instead of fighting the system that frustrated me. I'm trying to do better, to be better, to remember that power is meant to protect, not punish." He asked if I could forgive him. She looked at Eli. "I told him forgiveness isn't mine to give. It belongs to everyone he hurt. But I wished him well on his journey. People can change. We're proof of that." They walked through the store, watching employees who moved without fear, who laughed with customers without watching the clock, who took their breaks without guilt. It hadn't been easy. Old habits died hard, and some managers couldn't adapt to leadership through support rather than fear. But slowly, store by store, the culture shifted. Quinmart became known as the place that cared. Not perfect perfection was a myth that led to hiding problems rather than solving them, but genuinely trying to balance profit with people. "The board meets next week," Eli said as they reached the front entrance. They want to discuss the quarterly numbers. Profits are up, but not as much as projected. Some investors are grumbling about leaving money on the table, Sienna snorted. Let them grumble. We're leaving money on the table because we're putting food on our employees' tables. If they can't understand that investment in humans pays dividends that don't show up in quarterly reports, they're in the wrong business. She was right, of course. The metrics that mattered, employee retention, customer loyalty, community impact, couldn't be captured in a stock price. But try explaining that to hedge fund managers who measured success in basis points. Eli had spent a decade fighting that battle, sometimes winning, sometimes compromising, always remembering that compromise without conscience was just corruption with better PR. As they stood in the parking lot, Sienna's phone buzzed. Speaking of the next generation, she said, showing him the screen. A message from Ava. Mom, I'm writing a paper about heroes for English class. Can I interview you and Mr. Eli about the break room story? My teacher says it's not a real hero story because nobody fought dragons or saved the world. I told her that's exactly why it is a hero story. Regular people doing brave things. That's harder than fighting dragons. Eli smiled. Smart kid. Gets it from her mother. Sienna shook her head. She gets it from growing up seeing what's possible when people give a damn. When systems serve humans instead of consuming them. When a CEO can admit he's wrong and a cashier can speak her truth. That's the world she knows. Imagine what her generation will build. They said their goodbyes, and Eli sat in his car for a moment, not starting the engine. 10 years, thousands of lives changed. Millions of dollars redirected from executive bonuses to employee benefits. A revolution that started with tears and grew into transformation. And yet, he knew it could all disappear. The next CEO might prioritize differently. The board might demand a return to traditional management. The culture they'd built was strong but not invincible. That's why he'd started writing it all down. Not the sanitized corporate history that would end up in business schools, but the real story, the messy, human truth of it. The mistakes made along the way because there were many. The resistance faced, not just from managers like Marcus, but from employees who'd been hurt so often they couldn't believe things could be different. The constant balance between financial sustainability and human dignity. The days when he wanted to give up, to return to the simple brutality of numbers without faces. But then he'd remember Sienna behind that refrigerator. Remember her mixing Tylenol with water. Remember 90 seconds of compassion being called a crime. And he'd find the strength to keep pushing, keep changing, keep proving that business could be a force for healing rather than harm. Because once you've seen the truth, really seen it, not through reports or presentations, but through tears in a break room, you can't unsee it. You can only choose what to do with that knowledge. As he finally started the car, his phone lit up with a text from Sienna. A photo of the break room plaque, with a handwritten note stuck below it. Mr. Eddy, thanks for seeing me when I was invisible. Now I help others be seen. The ripples never end. Signed by an employee he didn't recognize, someone who'd found their own moment of transformation in that sacred space. The last thing Eli did each night before sleeping was read employee messages. Not the filtered ones that used to reach his desk, full of corporate speak and careful praise. The real ones. The mother in Phoenix who could finally afford her son's autism therapy. The father in Detroit who was finishing his engineering degree at 55. The teenager in Miami who'd started as a cart collector and was now heading to medical school, tuition paid by the company that believed in her potential. Each message was a reminder. Each story a responsibility. Each life touched a reason to keep fighting for a world where no one had to hide their tears in a break room, where kindness wasn't suspicious, where 90 seconds of compassion was celebrated rather than punished. It wasn't a perfect world, it wasn't even a perfect company, but it was better. Immeasurably, undeniably better. And sometimes, that's all revolution is, making things better, one tear, one truth, one transformed life at a time. Until better becomes normal. Until normal becomes unacceptable. Until the cycle starts again, always pushing toward a world where every Sienna is seen, every Eli remembers to care, and every break room is a place where humanity matters more than metrics. The story continues. In stores across the country, in break rooms and boardrooms, in the space between policy and practice. It continues because the work of making business human is never finished. It continues because somewhere, right now, someone is crying behind a refrigerator, waiting for someone to ask if they're okay, and somewhere else, someone is finding the courage to ask. That's how the world changes. Not all at once, not through grand gestures or viral moments, but through small acts of radical kindness that ripple outward until the whole ocean moves. And in the end, that's the only business advice that matters. Look for tears, listen to truth, choose compassion over efficiency when they conflict. Remember that every policy lands on a human life. Build systems that heal rather than harm. And never, ever forget that the most important conversation of your career might happen in a break room with someone making minimum wage who has everything to teach you about what really matters. The revolution is waiting. It always has been. It just needs someone to ask, "Are you okay?" and mean it. The crying was different this time. Not the angry tears of a bad customer or the frustrated sobs of a broken register. This was deeper, the sound of someone breaking. In the dim corner of a Quinmart break room, behind an old refrigerator, a young woman had given up trying to stay quiet. When the delivery driver found her there, mascara streaking down her cheeks, he asked the question that would change everything. "Are you okay?" She looked up with dead eyes. "My daughter has strep throat. The antibiotics cost $42. I've been mixing children's Tylenol with water to make it last." Her voice cracked. "I make $7.50 an hour. Tell me, am I okay?" Eli Grant was 35 years old, but success had aged him in ways that weren't visible in Forbes profiles or TED Talk appearances. He'd built Quinmart from a single store to a retail empire in just 12 years, becoming the youngest CEO of a Fortune 500 company. The business press called him a prodigy, a disruptor, a visionary who understood modern retail. But standing in that dingy break room, wearing a polyester uniform with Eddie embroidered on the pocket, he realized he didn't understand anything at all. The undercover assignment was supposed to last 2 weeks. A quick dive into operations, some FaceTime with floor employees, then back to the executive suite with insights to share at the next board meeting. He'd done this before at other locations, always learning something useful about efficiency or customer flow. But he'd never met anyone like Sienna Moore. 22 years old, with eyes that belonged to someone twice her age, Sienna had started at Quinmart 2 months earlier. Every morning, she transformed herself in the employee bathroom, changing from exhausted mother to eager cashier in 3 minutes flat. She'd learned to hide the dark circles with dollar store concealer, to swallow yawns during customer interactions, to never mention the 3-year-old daughter waiting at home. The application had asked about dependents, and she'd lied without hesitation. Single mothers were liability magnets in retail. They called out for fevers and school events. They couldn't work doubles or cover last-minute shifts. They were, in the cold calculus of scheduling software, inefficient. So Sienna became someone else from 7 to 3, then again from 4 to midnight when she picked up shifts at the gas station down the street. That Tuesday afternoon would haunt Eli for years. He'd been refilling his coffee, mentally reviewing the inefficiencies he'd noticed in receiving when he heard crying. Not the frustrated tears of a bad customer interaction or the angry sobs of a workplace dispute. This was deeper, more primal, the sound of someone breaking apart. He found her wedged into the corner behind the refrigerator, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to become invisible. Her whole body shook with the effort of staying quiet. "I'm sorry," she gasped when she saw him, scrambling to stand. "Please don't tell Marcus. I just need 1 minute. I'll clock out if I have to. Please." The desperation in her voice stopped him cold. He grabbed 2 chairs from the break table, positioning one near her, one at a respectful distance. "Nobody's telling Marcus anything," he said quietly, sitting down. "Take all the time you need. Sometimes a minute isn't enough." She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Kindness, apparently, was rare in this place. Finally, the words came tumbling out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for months, and the dam had finally cracked. Her mother had died 6 months ago. Lung cancer, though she'd never smoked a day in her life. 20 years of cleaning office buildings at night, breathing in chemicals and dust, had taken their toll. No insurance meant the hospital bills kept coming even after the funeral. $47,000 in debt for the privilege of watching her mother die in pain. Sienna had dropped out of community college to work full-time, but minimum wage math was cruel. After rent, utilities, and daycare, She had $37 left each month. $37 for food, gas, medicine, clothes, and the thousand small emergencies that define poverty. "Ava's sick," she whispered, and fresh tears started falling. "My daughter, she's had a fever for 3 days. The clinic said it's probably strep. The antibiotics are $42 with the discount card. I don't get paid until Friday." She laughed bitterly. "I've been mixing children's Tylenol with water to make it last longer. What kind of mother does that? But if I miss another shift, Marcus will fire me. He already wrote me up yesterday because I was talking to customers too much. He said I was wasting time being friendly during rush hour." Eli felt something shift inside his chest. He'd implemented those efficiency metrics himself, proud of shaving seconds off each transaction. Customer engagement scores were important, but not as important as speed. He'd said those exact words in a quarterly meeting, watching his VPs nod approvingly. But here was the human cost of his brilliant strategies, a young mother diluting medicine because she smiled too much at work. "What did the customer say?" he asked carefully. "The one you were talking to?" Sienna wiped her eyes with her sleeve. She was buying flowers for her daughter's grave. Today would have been her sweet 16. She needed someone to tell her the yellow roses were beautiful, that her daughter would have loved them. It took maybe 90 seconds. But Marcus was watching, and 90 seconds times 20 transactions equals. She shrugged. "I'm not good at math, but apparently it equals a write-up." The break room door banged open. Marcus Chen, the shift supervisor, stood in the doorway like an avenging angel of middle management. Early 40s, permanently angry, the kind of man who confused fear with respect. "More, your break ended 5 minutes ago. And you," he pointed at Eli, "delivery drivers aren't authorized for this break room. Employee areas are for employees only." The irony of that statement, telling an employee they weren't employee enough, wasn't lost on Eli. "She's not feeling well," Eli said calmly. "I was making sure she was okay." Marcus's face darkened. "If she's too sick to work, she can clock out. We're not running a charity here." He looked at Sienna with unveiled disgust. "Though some people seem to think we are. 5 minutes more, or it's another write-up. 3 strikes, you know the policy." After Marcus left, Sienna stood on shaking legs. "Thank you for being kind," she said quietly. "People aren't usually kind here." She headed for the door, then turned back. "Your name's Eddie, right? I've seen you making deliveries. You're different from the others. You actually look at us when you talk. Most people look through us like we're part of the fixtures." Then she was gone, leaving Eli alone with his coffee and his growing rage. He spent the rest of his shift observing with new eyes. The way employees flinched when managers approached. How they ate lunch standing up because sitting looked lazy. The camera in the break room that everyone pretended not to notice. He'd approved that security upgrade himself, concerned about inventory shrinkage. It never occurred to him that employees might need somewhere to cry in private, to make desperate phone calls to sick children, to be human for 30 unpaid minutes. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Sienna mixing Tylenol with water, about yellow roses for a dead teenager, about 90 seconds of kindness being a fireable offense. His penthouse apartment, with its panoramic city views and designer furniture, felt like a prison of his own making. Every luxury mocked him. The espresso machine that cost more than Sienna made in 3 months. The wine collection worth more than her mother's medical debt. The bathroom medicine cabinet stocked with prescriptions he rarely needed, while she rationed children's Tylenol like liquid gold. At 3 in the morning, he gave up and drove to the 24-hour pharmacy. The contrast hit him immediately: harsh lights, scuffed floors, a security guard eyeing everyone with suspicion. This was where his employees shopped, counted pennies, made impossible choices: children's antibiotics, children's Tylenol, children's cold medicine. The pharmacist raised an eyebrow at the quantity. "Stocking up," Eli mumbled. He added bandages, thermometers, hand sanitizer, then stood in the formula aisle, overwhelmed. How did parents choose when every dollar mattered? How did they decide between name brand and generic when their child was sick? He thought about the company health plan he'd negotiated for corporate employees. Full coverage, no deductibles, even gym memberships, and meditation apps. Executive physicals at the Mayo Clinic. Therapy covered without question. Prescription medications delivered to their offices. Meanwhile, the people who actually ran his stores, who faced customers every day, who made his empire possible, they diluted medicine and prayed. The disconnect was so vast it took his breath away. He'd built two different companies without realizing it, one for people like him, one for people like Sienna. The next morning he arrived early with 2 coffee cups and a bag from the bakery down the street. He found Sienna in the parking lot, sitting in a car that had more rust than paint, engine running. "Gas is cheaper than daycare," she explained when he knocked on the window. "If I drop Ava off right when they open, I save an hour. $12. She saw the bag and shook her head. "I can't take charity. I'm not." She stopped, searching for words. "I work. I'm not looking for handouts." "It's not charity," Eli said carefully. "It's coffee between coworkers. Unless Marcus has a policy against that, too." The ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Probably. Give him time." They sat in her car, windows cracked against the morning chill, sharing chocolate croissants in silence. Finally, she asked, "Why are you being nice to me? What do you want?" The question hurt more than it should have. What kind of world had taught her that kindness always had a price? "I don't want anything," he said. "Maybe I just think people should be able to afford medicine for their kids. Maybe I think 90 seconds of compassion shouldn't be a crime. Maybe I'm just tired of watching good people get ground down by bad systems." She studied him with those 2 old eyes. "You talk like someone who's been in charge, like you've made systems. What did you do before this?" Eli stared at his coffee cup, fighting the urge to tell her everything. "I built something," he said finally. "Something I thought mattered. But I built it wrong. Put the wrong things at the center. Now I'm trying to understand why it's breaking the people it should be protecting." She nodded slowly. "The broken things usually started out trying to help. That's what makes them so dangerous. They still look helpful from the outside." Over the next 2 weeks, Eli became her shadow. He timed his deliveries to coincide with her breaks, learning her story in 15-minute increments. Her father had left when she was 12. Her mother had worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. Sienna had been valedictorian of her high school class, full scholarship to state college, dreams of becoming a teacher. Then her mother got sick, and dreams became luxuries she couldn't afford. "I used to write poetry," she told him one afternoon, sharing a sandwich he'd accidentally bought 2 of. "Won a few contests in high school. Now I can't remember the last time I read a book, much less wrote anything. When you're this tired, words just float away." He learned about Ava through stories and phone calls. 3 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs, convinced that clouds were made of cotton candy and rain happened when angels spilled their drinks. "She calls me her superhero," Sienna said, showing him a crayon drawing on her phone. "Can you imagine? I can't even buy her medicine, but she thinks I can fly." The drawing showed 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "That's us at the park. We go every Sunday if it's not raining. Free entertainment. She loves the swings." The breaking point came on a Thursday. Eli was unloading deliveries when he heard shouting from the front of the store. He found Marcus berating Sienna in full view of customers, holding a register tape like evidence in a murder trial. $20 short, he announced loudly. "Second time this month. You think we don't notice? You think we're stupid?" Sienna stood frozen, face burning with humiliation. Customers stared, some recording with their phones. This would be on social media within hours. Another retail worker exposed and shamed for entertainment. "I counted it 3 times, she whispered. "It was correct when I handed it to night shift." "Please, can we talk about this in the office?" Marcus stepped closer, enjoying his power. "Thieves don't get privacy, they get fired. Clock out. Clean out your locker. If anything's missing from there too, we'll prosecute." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Several employees looked away, grateful it wasn't them, knowing it could be tomorrow. Eli stepped forward, abandoning 2 weeks of careful observation. "I saw what happened," he said clearly. "Customer paid with 2 20s stuck together. She called him back, returned the extra bill. I was standing right there. It was a lie, but a necessary one." Marcus turned on him, face purpling. "Stay out of this, delivery boy. You don't work here. You don't know anything." The words were perfect in their irony. Eli smiled coldly. "I know more than you think." He pulled out his phone, started recording. "Why don't you tell everyone about the administrative fees you charge for schedule changes? $5 to swap a shift, tend to request a specific day off. Cash only, no receipts. The color drained from Marcus's face. Or we could discuss the time clock that always rounds down. 7:53 becomes 7:45. 8:07 becomes 8:15. Funny how it never makes mistakes in the employee's favor. Other workers started gathering, drawn by the drama and the impossible sight of someone standing up to Marcus. "You're done," Marcus snarled. "I'll have you banned from every Quinmart in the state," Eli kept recording. "Please do. Make sure you spell my name right. It's Eli Grant, CEO of Quinmart. And you're right about one thing, you are done." The silence that followed was complete. Even the muzak seemed to pause. Sienna's hand covered her mouth. Other employees stood frozen, processing the impossible. The delivery driver they'd been sharing break room coffee with, complaining to about schedules and policies, was the man whose signature appeared on their paychecks. Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. "Right, and I'm Jeff Bezos, security." But Eli was already pulling out his corporate phone, the one he'd kept locked in his truck for 2 weeks. He dialed a number from memory. "Jennifer, it's Eli. I need you and the entire senior team at store number 473. Yes, now. Yes, all of them. We have a situation that requires immediate intervention." He looked at Marcus, whose face had gone from purple to gray. "You might want to start updating your resume, though I wouldn't use me as a reference." Within an hour, the store was in controlled chaos. The regional vice president arrived first, followed by the head of human resources, the chief operations officer, and enough corporate firepower to run a small country. Eli had changed back into his suit in the employee bathroom, the same cramped space where Sienna transformed herself each morning. When he emerged, the transformation was complete. The friendly delivery driver was gone, replaced by the youngest CEO in retail history, the wonderkind who'd built an empire on efficiency and innovation and forgotten the human cost. He called an all-hands meeting in the warehouse, using pallets as a makeshift stage. Every employee from every shift crowded in, even those who weren't scheduled to work. Word had spread through the employee group chat like wildfire. The CEO had been among them. The CEO had seen everything. The CEO was here. Eli stood before them, seeing his company clearly for the first time. Not the gleaming corporate headquarters or impressive quarterly reports, but this exhausted faces, worn shoes, people who diluted medicine and skipped meals and smiled through humiliation because they needed the work. "I've spent 2 weeks among you," he began, his voice carrying in the warehouse silence. "I've seen how you're treated, how the policies I created, policies meant to ensure fairness and efficiency, have been weaponized against you. I've seen managers charge illegal fees, steal your time, humiliate you for sport. I've seen good people accused of theft while the real thieves wore ties and collected bonuses." He paused, finding Sienna in the crowd. She was crying again, but these were different tears. "I've seen a young mother have to choose between her child's medicine and her job. Choose between compassion and a paycheck. That's not a choice anyone should face, not in my stores, not anywhere." The changes he announced were immediate and sweeping. Marcus Chen and his entire management team were terminated for cause, escorted out while employees watched. The store's management would be rebuilt from the ground up, with input from floor workers. But that was just the beginning. Effective immediately, the minimum wage at Quinmart is $15 an hour. Not in 5 years, not gradually now. Full health benefits begin on day 1, not after 90 days. Dependent care assistance for every parent, and something else. He looked directly at Sienna. An education program. Full tuition for any employee who wants to continue their education. GED, community college, 4-year degrees, trade schools. Whatever path you choose, we'll support it. The warehouse erupted, people crying, hugging, some standing in shocked silence. But Eli wasn't finished. "I'm also creating an employee experience council, not staffed by MBAs or consultants, but by you, the people who actually know what it's like to work here. Who understand the distance between policy and reality? Who can tell me when I'm building systems that hurt instead of help?" He found Sienna again. "Miss Moore, I'd like you to consider being our first member. Your insight about broken systems that still look helpful from the outside, we need that perspective." After the meeting, in the chaos of employees taking selfies and calling family members with the news, Eli found Sienna sitting on a pallet, staring at nothing. "This is real?" she asked when he approached. "Not some elaborate prank or social experiment?" He sat beside her, suddenly exhausted. "It's real, and it's overdue, and it's probably not enough. But it's a start." She turned to him, those old soul eyes seeing straight through his corporate armor. "Why didn't you tell me who you were? Would you have been honest if you knew? Would you have told the CEO about diluting medicine, about crying in break rooms, about managers who steal time and dignity?" She shook her head slowly. I would have smiled and said everything was fine, like we always do." They sat in silence for a moment. Then she asked, "The education program. You're serious? I could finish my degree? What were you studying?" "Elementary education. I wanted to teach kindergarten." Her voice broke on the words, dreams she'd buried coming back to life. "I wanted to teach kids that the world was full of possibilities." "So teach them," Eli said simply. "Show them what's possible when someone believes in you. When systems support instead of suppress. When companies remember that their greatest assets aren't in warehouses or algorithms, but in people like you." She started crying again, and impulsively hugged him. He hugged her back, this young woman who'd changed everything by being brave enough to cry where someone could see her. The transformation of Quinmart became a business school case study, analyzed and dissected by professors who missed the point entirely. They focused on the metrics, the 40% reduction in turnover, the 20% increase in customer satisfaction, the surprising 15% jump in profits. They created graphs showing the correlation between employee investment and market performance. They used terms like human capital optimization and stakeholder value alignment. They missed the break room tears, the diluted medicine, the 90 seconds of compassion that started a revolution. Eli kept his office at corporate but spent half his time in stores, talking to employees, looking for the next Sienna. He found them everywhere once he started looking. James in Portland, working 3 jobs to pay for his father's dementia care. Maria in Tucson, hiding her pregnancy because she couldn't afford to lose hours. David in Detroit, a former engineer stocking shelves at 60 because age discrimination was real and brutal. Each story added another program, another support system, another way to make work work for humans instead of the other way around. Sienna finished her degree in 3 years, working full-time while studying at night. Eli attended her graduation, sitting with Ava in the audience, both of them cheering embarrassingly loud when she walked across the stage. She could have left then, taken her education degree, and found a teaching job anywhere. Instead, she chose to stay, building Quinmart's employee advocacy program from the ground up. Her office, and yes, she had a real office now, with windows and everything, became a safe space for workers facing crisis. The woman who once hid behind a refrigerator to cry now made sure no one else had to hide their humanity. "You know what's funny?" she told Eli one day, reviewing applications for the education program. "I used to think success meant escaping retail, getting a real job, a professional career. But this is real. These people were helping, their lives were changing. This matters more than anything I could do in a classroom." She'd kept her old name tag, framed on her desk next to Ava's latest dinosaur drawing. A reminder of where she came from, who she fought for, why the work mattered. The ripple effects spread beyond Quinmart. Competitors, facing pressure from workers and negative comparisons in the media, began raising wages and benefits. The phrase "the Quinmart question" entered corporate vocabulary, shorthand for asking whether policies that looked good in boardrooms actually worked on shop floors. Business leaders flew in to study the transformation, always surprised to find that the secret wasn't complicated algorithms or innovative technologies, but simply treating humans like humans. Eli never forgot that Tuesday in the break room. In every meeting, every decision, every policy discussion, he heard Sienna's voice talking about broken systems that still looked helpful from the outside. He kept a photo on his desk, not of himself ringing the opening bell on Wall Street or shaking hands with presidents, but of a child's drawing. 2 stick figures under a rainbow, for Mr. Eddie written in purple crayon. A reminder that sometimes the most important conversations happen in break rooms, that tears can water revolution, that 35-year-old prodigies can learn more from 22-year-old cashiers than from any business school. 5 years later, at Quinmart's annual leadership conference, Sienna delivered the keynote address. She stood before 3,000 managers, district leaders, and executives. No longer the frightened girl hiding behind a refrigerator, but not forgetting her either. "Every one of you has a Sienna in your store," she said, voice steady and strong, someone crying in silence, someone choosing between dignity and survival, someone whose potential is being crushed by systems that prioritize efficiency over humanity. Your job, our job, is to find them, to see them, to ask not just if they're meeting metrics, but if they're okay, really okay. She talked about her mother, who died thinking she'd failed because she couldn't leave her daughter more than debt. About Ava, now 8, who wanted to be a paleontologist and had never known a Christmas without presents. About Eli, who had the courage to admit his empire was built on the wrong foundation and tear it down to build it right. He asked me once why I thanked him for being kind. I told him people weren't usually kind here. That should have broken his heart. It did break his heart, and that's when everything changed. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes, but Eli barely noticed. He was thinking about all the break rooms in all the stores, all the tears still being hidden, all the Siennas still waiting to be seen. The work wasn't done. It would never be done. But it had started, really started, the day he asked a crying woman if she was okay and meant it. The day he learned that the distance between a boardroom and a break room could be measured in more than miles. It could be measured in medicine diluted with water, in dreams deferred by debt, in 90 seconds of compassion that cost too much. After her speech, Sienna found him in the hotel lobby, both of them escaping the conference networking reception. "Did I do okay?" she asked. And for a moment he saw her as she'd been young, scared, sure that kindness always had a price. "You did perfect," he said. "You told the truth. That's all we can ever do. Tell the truth and hope someone listens." She smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. Someone did listen. In a break room, when I needed it most, someone listened. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights through the hotel windows. Two unlikely revolutionaries who'd found each other in the least likely place and changed an empire one tear at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new systems to fix, new Siennas to find and lift up. But tonight, they could rest in the knowledge that sometimes not often enough, but sometimes power listened to pain, systems bent toward justice, and the right person asked the right question at the right moment. "Are you okay?" And sometimes, eventually, the answer could be yes. "Yes, I'm okay. Yes, I can afford my daughter's medicine. Yes, I can finish my education. Yes, I can be seen as human in a place that once saw only labor. Yes, there's hope. Yes, things can change. Yes, a 35-year-old CEO can learn from a 22-year-old cashier that success isn't measured in market share or profit margins, but in how many people can answer that simple question with truth, instead of tears." The Quinmart story became legend in retail circles, told and retold with various embellishments. But those who were there, who lived through the transformation, knew the simple truth. It started with tears in a break room. It started with someone saying, "I'm not okay," and someone else saying, "Then let's fix that." It started with recognizing that every policy, every metric, every decision eventually found its way to a human being trying to make rent and raise children and maintain dignity in a world that seemed designed to strip it away. Eli Grant remained CEO for another decade, building Quinmart into something unprecedented, a profitable company that put people first and discovered, to Wall Street's amazement, that the two weren't mutually exclusive. But he dated his real success from that Tuesday afternoon, wearing a polyester uniform, standing in a flickering break room, learning that the empire he'd built was breaking the people it should have been protecting. Some lessons came from Harvard. Some came from mentors and advisors and market analysts. But the most important lesson came from a young mother who couldn't afford antibiotics and had the courage to cry where someone could see her. Years later, when journalists asked him about his leadership philosophy, he kept it simple. Find the break rooms, listen for tears, ask people if they're okay, and mean it. Build systems that support humans instead of consuming them. Remember that behind every uniform is a universe of dreams and struggles, and never, ever forget that the person teaching you the most important lesson might be making minimum wage and hiding tears behind the refrigerator. Sienna Moore became more than an employee advocate. She became the conscience of a corporation, the voice reminding everyone that policies had human costs, that efficiency meant nothing if it crushed spirits, that a company's true value lay not in its stock price, but in how many of its workers could afford their children's medicine. She never let them forget where she came from, never let success soften the edges of truth. In every meeting, every decision, she asked the question that had started everything. But what will this mean for someone crying in the break room? And in asking that question, again and again, she helped build something remarkable. Not just a better company, but a better model for what companies could be. A place where tears led to transformation instead of termination. Where kindness wasn't seen as weakness, but as the foundation of strength. Where a delivery driver could tell a cashier she mattered and mean it and change everything. The last entry in Sienna's journal, the one she kept for Ava, said this: "Baby girl, I used to hide when I cried. I thought tears were shameful, proof that I was failing. But tears are just truth trying to escape. They're stories demanding to be heard. Don't hide yours. Let them water something better. Find people who ask if you're okay and mean it. Be the person who asks others. Build a world where no one has to choose between compassion and survival. Where medicine never needs to be diluted. Where 90 seconds of kindness is celebrated, not punished. Where every break room is a place of breakthrough, not breakdown. That's the world we're building. One tear, one truth, one transformation at a time. For you, for everyone, for all the Siennas still waiting to be seen."